Hi, my name is Courtney McElkenny, and this is my first project analysing an area surrounding the West Link in North Belfast. During our initial group discussions, we were talking about various sites surrounding the West Link, and Townsend Street was pointed out. It was only upon these discussions that I realised on two separate occasions I had actually visited Townsend Street, once to the Welcome Organisation and on a second occasion to the Townsend Presbyterian Church. Yet, after both these visits, I had no idea that both these buildings were on the same street, only 100 metres apart. I then wanted to investigate what it was about the makeup of this street which caused such a level of disconnection within the same space. I thought that a possible reason for my ignorance to the proximity of both these buildings was because I approached both buildings from opposite ends of the same street. When seeking directions from a sat-nav, you are directed to opposite ends of the same street, even when departing from the same location, as I have mapped out both suggested routes from Google Maps, travelling from City Hall, Belfast. I believe this is the resulting impact of a 15cm wide gate, an interface, a modernised remnant from the Troubles era, dividing the street in two and disconnecting it in terms of accessibility, but also spatially in the footprint of Townsend Street as it sits today. The first interface was installed in Townsend Street in August 1969, after a period of intense violence and rioting resulted in the deployment of the British Army to the streets of Northern Ireland, and the intention of this was to separate the Falls Road and Peters Hill, historically distinct Catholic and Protestant areas. So this interface has stood since the period known as the Troubles began, although it's difficult to know what kind of interface was installed at that time. The earliest image available was taken in the 1990s at the dawn of the peace process. Installed in 1992, what stood was a gate not far from what the interface is today, and its purpose was to control the flow of vehicles and pedestrians through Townsend Street. After the Good Friday Agreement, Belfast attempted to move from this period of history, but tensions clearly remained within the communities, as sometime between then and 2003, this gate was boarded up with metal sheeting. By who is unclear, but this meant that both areas were completely visually disconnected, which over time hindered the communities from forming real connections. In February 2019, fallout was sparked between the PSNI and the Department of Justice, who own the interface as part of their interface programme, attempting to lessen or remove all interfaces by 2023. There was concern within the PSNI and community representatives when the Townsend Street interface was proposed to be replaced, as the Department of Justice failed to consult them about the security implications of the new gate's design, with the PSNI stating they should have been consulted to ensure the gate was secure by design, remembering that this was in 2019 and these attitudes still remained. In May of that year, two proposals were presented for the new gate, one fully closed in, and the second a gate akin to the previous structure. And in June 2019, the new gate was installed, with the community welcoming the upgrade, stating, "Closed gates equal closed minds, open gates equal open hearts." Even though this was 20 years after the Good Friday Agreement, the fear of contention was so high that the old gate was not dismantled until the new build was complete, so that at no point was Townsend Street left without an interface, resulting in the interface line moving a few feet towards Peters Hill. The upgrade hoped to improve the visual amenity in the area and increase passive surveillance due to the removal of concealed spaces. However, as we saw, a structure like this already existed in the 1990s, providing the same opportunities and it was boarded up. I want to take a closer look into Townsend Street and investigate the impact that this 51-year-long division has had on the space and what we have been left with today as a result. On visits to this site, my initial observations saw that the high concentration of cars is obvious. Due to its close proximity to city centre, many simply drive here to park their car on the roadside and walk to city centre. This became such an issue that some space on the site was actually dedicated to a car park, but this is only on the Peters Hill section. However, in contrast to this high proximity of parked cars, there seemed to be very little activity on the street, so I decided to record both pedestrian and vehicle traffic from 4 key positions: from the main road at Peters Hill, the Peters Hill section of Townsend Street, the Falls Road section of Townsend Street, and the main Falls Road. And I recorded the number of pedestrians and vehicles passing through within a period of 7 minutes. It is clearly mapped out that very few pedestrians make use of this area as a whole, yet on average, over 5 times that number of cars passed through within the same time frame. What is also exposed through this recording is the differing volume of both cars and pedestrians between both sides of the interface, with over 9 times more active use on the Falls Road section. I believe this is down to the fact that on the Falls Road section of Townsend Street there is an industrial park. However, this still shows that most people are entering this industrial park through the Falls Road and exiting through the same way. They aren't passing through the whole of Townsend Street. 51 years on, and this interface is still conducting its same purpose. 22 years after conflict has ended, it is still acting to limit and control vehicle and pedestrian use upon Townsend Street. From this survey, it seems that the closed-in nature of this interface has created a self-fulfilling prophecy for the community. Townsend Street is bordered at all edges by walls or gates, eliminating the opportunity for users of the space to make visual connections to the surrounding area, resulting in the space feeling uneasy to use due to this level of isolation that's created. Moving further from the impact this interface has on our usage of Townsend Street, how has it impacted the footprint and infrastructure of Townsend Street over the last 5 decades? On this highly detailed site plan, we can see the interface clearly and how it divides this space. This plan shows that Townsend Street runs parallel to the Westlink and that at one time it was a connecting route between Peters Hill of the Shankill and the Falls Road, historically distinctive Protestant and Catholic areas. By mapping out all of the green, well-kept planted areas, overgrown empty spaces, and on-site buildings, it highlights that the Falls Road section of Townsend Street seems to have received more investment and attention than the Peters Hill section. And when we compare this to the mapping of the roads, it's clear how separate and disconnected this street has become, in contrast to the connected through road that it once was, and the connection it once had to city centre before the development of the Westlink. Taking a closer look into the empty space at the corner of Townsend Street and Peters Hill, I could see that lying dormant under the overgrowth was some kind of previous attempt to build, and I wanted to investigate why this work was never completed. Through historical imaging of the site, I actually discovered that these ruins derived from previously built structures on the site, as shown here from this image taken in 2001. Note the utopian vision for the site. It's bright, it's new, with lots of green space, and this was taken only 3 years after the Good Friday Agreement. What was a previous site of contention was now showing some hope for a future Belfast. In 2007, however, 6 years later, we can see the beginnings of its deterioration, and it was then that these buildings were demolished, although the reason why is unknown. We then arrive today, at 2020, to a very dull and isolated site with ruins of its previously built prosper. However, this empty space was approved in 2018 for the erection of 2 blocks, the proposal images of which are shown here. One consisting of 22 apartments and the other with office space and community use. One of the main issues this project wants to tackle is the impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding area. But this sparked the argument, what is the character of Townsend Street? As letters of objection to this development state that a clean-cut 6-storey building is completely out of character for the area, and this can be made evident when the proposals are displayed next to snapshots from the current street front. And when we take a step closer, we can view the remnants of times past as they remain untouched and uninspired in the footprint of Townsend Street. We see a space left in time and isolated within the fabric of the city. A street once directly connected to the heart of its city centre and once a connecting route between 2 communities, now segregated from all surrounding areas by motorways, interfaces, gates, walls, and societal attitudes, the most difficult barrier to overcome. And as a result, we have been left with a space not necessarily forgotten in time, but a space which hasn't received the attention it needs in order to achieve the potential of reconnecting our city and its communities. Throughout this analysis, I studied Irving Goffman's asylums to help me understand what were these societal attitudes and issues that we have to overcome in order to fully move on from this period of conflict. To discuss this, we must consider the interface and governing bodies around it as the total institution, and the communities living in its footprint as the inmates. In these environments, the view often projected to the outside world is one of unity and high standards. Inmates and staff of the institution are on good terms, when really there are 3 aspects to the reality of this environment. That which is concealed from inmates, that which is revealed to inmates, and that which is shown to visitors. Within these total institutions, staying out of trouble is likely to require persistent and conscious effort, and constraints which place inmates in a position to sympathise and communicate with one another, for example, a see-through interface, do not necessarily lead to high group morale, especially in situations with previous conflicts and disputes. Instead, it has been found that often inmates cannot rely on their fellows, who may steal from them, assault them, and squeal on them, leading to what studies refer to as anomie. The lack of social or ethical standards in an individual or group. And with these images being taken within the last decade, it is evident that the institution of this interface has hindered the development and growth of the society around it. How can we wish to recover our infrastructure built around a conflict which ended 2 decades ago, when the lasting milieu still remains? As Goffman states, the total institution frequently claims to be concerned with rehabilitation, that is, to prepare the inmate for release. In this context, this means resetting the community's self-regulatory mechanisms so that once the interface is removed, they will maintain the standards of the established interface of their own accord. But in fact, this claim is seldom realised and neglects to consider the theory of release anxiety, where the individual is unwilling to reassume the responsibility from which they're freed. The removal of an interface when atmospheres of conflict and suspicion remain only fuels anxiety from communities at the prospect of being left without their security shield. 51 years after this interface was erected, the surrounding communities have suffered from disculturalization through failing to acquire some of the habits currently required to allow their society to recover. Is there a way, however, that we can design and redevelop these areas to account for this? Can we design to encourage the psychology of these communities to grow and feel safe using communal spaces? We may never fully understand the entirety of our societal context or previous circumstantial decisions, but what is clear is that in order to make impactful steps in the future recovery of Belfast, we must not only remove existing interfaces, but we must reinvent the space around them, which has taken shape over the last 51 years. How we do this successfully will need investigation, but one thing is clear: our attempts until now don't seem to be enough.